I don't see the younger people taking the time to teach the entire game. We're taking parts of the game and thinking if we just do the parts of the game, that's going to be enough to sustain success. And it may give somebody success for a moment. Is it going to give them a career?
Yeah.
See, to have a career, I think you have to have a long period of obedience in the same direction.
All right, Coach, ready?
It's on you.
Perfect. All right.
It's your game.
There we go. All right, so I always like to start with just more so just getting to know you. So one thing we used to do at UNF was he called it the family series, where you go over just in your life history, quick history, highlight, heartache, hero, and hope. And so I just want to know if you would just give us a little window into who Stan Jones is.
That's an interesting breakdown of how you do it, because I'm not sure we always take those parts of heartbreak and hope and all that kind of stuff. Because I think when you're built on faith, hope is eternal. And so you're always keeping hope alive in everything that you do. If you're trying to live your life by faith, whether that's a spiritual faith or just faith in yourself or faith in the future, and there's a lot of people use now faith over fear kind of deal. So just a little bit about me. I grew up in the son of a pastor. My father was much older when he had me. He was in his late 40s. He had been in the Assemblies of God denomination, had been previously married, had 5 children from that marriage, and they had divorced. And in that denomination, they did not allow you to hold a minister position if you were divorced. And he ended up remarrying my mother. And so all my siblings were significantly older than me. And my father was a product of the Depression. And so everything was about hard work. Everything was about don't waste. Everything was about live your life according to what the Bible and the Scriptures say. Absolutely. There was no gray area in my father's house. It was black and white, because when he gave his life to becoming a Christian, he at that time was considered the hardest-nosed, toughest, kind of most out-of-control person in his county. From everything from alcoholism, chain smoker, fighting, gambling, womanizing, everything. And he went to a tent revival. In those days, they had revivals outdoors at times. And he went there with the intent that he was going to harass the minister off the stage.
Wow.
And he got caught by the Spirit, and he gave his life to Christ that night. And in one decision, he went cold turkey and never had any other bout with any of those things that he had been part of his life.
That's incredible.
And it is very incredible, because not many people can do that, because the power of addiction is such a strong hold on everybody. And but he was just that grounded in what he believed and what he thought you were supposed to do by how he understood what the Bible said. And so it was a very demanding household, but it was also a household that expected you to do right, live right, and make a difference in everything that you do. Yeah. And so his church sponsored a school. I ended up going to school there for my high school career. I went on to went to the University of Memphis, which was Memphis State University at the time. I ended up making the team as a walk-on player through a very pretty big tryout process. I was very blessed. My whole life is a story of just how the effects of positive prayer have been on my life. And I made that team, so I got to be. And I share that because those 2 years I was on the team as a walk-on player, which in those days every program had a junior varsity program in college, which they played a preliminary game to the main game. The only teams that do that nowadays is North Carolina still does it, and all the Ivy League teams still do it.
Gotcha.
And a lot of programs cut. I wish they would still have it, because it allowed coaches to practice coaching and allowed players that put in a lot of behind-the-scenes hard work that help teams get ready, those kids to find some extrinsic rewards and not just getting the intrinsic rewards. Right. But because of that, all the stuff I had to observe and learn, and I'd started coaching the 6th grade team at my father's private school, his church's private school, on Saturday mornings. And
while you were in college?
While I was in college. Okay. As a freshman and a sophomore. And I went from being a business major that I wanted to be a coach. And so those 2 years I was coaching, and then after 2 years of being a walk-on, they had a coaching change. A new coach came in, and he dropped the JV program. He did not believe in walk-ons. He had a wholly different philosophy, including one of my teammates who they'd given a scholarship to. He took the kid's scholarship away from him. And so I had a chance to be the junior high coach at that point, and I had changed my major, and went into that. And then 2 years later than that, the high school job came open. I took the high school job at 21 years old.
Wow.
And I coached high school for 14 years, 9 in Memphis at my father's church's school, sponsor school. Then I got an opportunity to coach at the biggest private school in the state of Mississippi.
Wow.
And I went down there to Jackson Academy, which had not had a lot of success in basketball at the time, but it was a very, very prominent school in the community in terms of the clientele of students that went there. Is very affluent, very successful people went there, and they wanted basketball to be good. The new headmaster and the new AD wanted something, and it goes back to how you never know how you get a job.
Yeah.
And if I'm going too long, just cut me off on any of this kind of
you're
stuff. But the new AD had been the head basketball coach at another school in the Jackson area. And we had gone down to play in the state tournament because our private school, even though it was in Memphis, played in the Association for Private Schools for the Mid-South.
Right.
And I called them and asked if we could use their gym for practice. And he graciously, I didn't know him, he graciously let us go in there and practice. And as he's walking through the gym, watching us run a practice, getting ready to play in the state tournament, he just remembered it. And when I applied for the job, he's now the AD at this other school.
Wow.
And so I got an interview because he remembered what I looked like running a program, running my team in practice. And so I got that job at Jackson Academy. One thing led to another. We had great success. We won a whole bunch of games with a great group of guys that came through there. But on top of that, at that time in Mississippi, most of those private schools and public schools were built out of segregation. And so the white private school kids and the black public school kids were not playing against each other. Well, I was come from Memphis where we were a basketball city.
Yeah.
And so I started working all the local camps in town. That was a big deal with camps in there. Got to know those coaches. They started realizing I was a basketball guy. I wasn't in there trying to, do anything or make myself bigger than them.
Yeah.
I was just a basketball guy. And I started asking if my guys could come play in their city summer leagues, and we went to their team camps, and I wanted my guys to get better. I told our guys all the time, we're not just trying to beat the best teams in our association. I want to be able to play with anybody.
Yeah.
And so we did that, and through the course of all that, one of my players' fathers was a prominent attorney in town. There was an African-American lawyer in town who was very prominent, who had a son coming up, and the AAU thing was starting to mushroom and get bigger and kind of snowballed into what we now have in the basketball world nowadays. So they wanted their kids to experience that, so they decided we're going to put a team together, and we're going to he's going to get some of the public school kids, my guys going to get the private school kids, and because of my relationship with everybody, they wanted me to coach the team.
That's awesome.
So we created now, all the schools, they play each other. All those schools are integrated now. And so a lot of that stuff's happened. And out of all of that, while we were playing in the AAU tournament that year in Winston-Salem, North Carolina at Wake Forest, back when they used to move it around. Nowadays, they usually play it down in Orlando. Back then, the college coaches could come talk to the coaches at the tournament. And so we play, and the first day we play, Coach Hamilton's brought over there by a guy that's a scouting service guy in the Mississippi area and introduced him, and he asked about some of our players.
Yeah.
Just by chance. I'd never met him before.
Right.
Next day, he sends an assistant over there. They like a couple of the guys on our team. Next thing I know, they want to know when they can see him again. I said, well, the City League All-Star Games next Tuesday in Jackson. The guys will be playing in that. I'll be there. I can help you with whatever you need. We're sitting there, and it's like almost the end of the first quarter of the All-Star game, and the assistant coach comes in. He's kind of frazzled, running late, and he's very apologetic. And I just got moved up to a recruiting spot. And
right.
I had to handle some stuff in the office today, and I'm sorry I'm getting late. And this scouting service guy is sitting there and saying, well, if y'all need a coach. He had a real high, twangy voice. If y'all need a coach, y'all need to hire Coach Jones. And Gerald Snyder was his name. Rest his soul, he's passed away now. And the guy said, well, look, Coach has no idea who he's going to hire. He said, he's looking for a guy that has some of the traits that you have. And I didn't know what those were. He said, I think Coach is going to be in the office tomorrow, so if you want to send your stuff down there, here's the number. You can send it down to him, and I'll let him know what I thought about what you did. So I go to the Kinko's the next morning. I send my stuff down there to him. Again, it goes back to prayer and how things in faith happened. That night at that All-Star game, Rick Stansberry, who's assistant coach, and Richard Williams, the head coach at Mississippi State, are there. And then I had started running their camps for them, being a gym director for their camps. And they had kind of insinuated they were going to hire me for a position on staff at some point. So, and I said, y'all know Leonard Hamilton at all? And they said, Rick Stansberry spoke up real quick. He said, I know him really well. We both started under the same head coach at the same school at Austin Peay State University. And they were not at the same time, but it was the same guy. So they had a mutual connection of being under the late Kelly tree. And so he said, I'll call Coach once we get off the road and recommend him to you.
Yeah.
So I called up Jerry Wainwright, who was at North Carolina Wilmington at the time, and he had recruited my last player that had signed there. And I said, you know Leonard Hamilton? He said, we've been close friends for over 20 years. He said, I'll call him for you. And so I think nothing more of it. I'm just trying to do the right thing to see if I can get a chance. And I get another call from the assistant about 2 days later, and he says, hey, is there a chance next Sunday that you could work your guys out? And I'm thinking they just want to recruit our players.
Right.
And so I said, yeah, I'll get them in there on Sunday afternoon. We'll go at whatever time. I remember 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I said, just let me know what time you get in. We'll set it for whenever you get to the gym. So, again, knowing Coach Hamilton and how he operates, he's not a guy that's just taking the general way people will recommend you. I found out later he actually sent the assistant coach back in not really to watch our players. They had already made decisions about our players. They were wanting to see how I really worked out guys on the floor because he was looking for a guy that had been a head coach at any level.
Right.
He wanted somebody who had been part of the five-star family, which is five-star was a huge part of basketball at that time.
Yep.
And a guy that had a reputation for player development and team development because they were just starting then it was 2 hours a week skill development during the preseason and the offseason.
Gotcha, yep.
And that position didn't recruit at the time. So he was looking for somebody that he could just turn over because Coach Hamilton was such a legendary recruiter. He just wanted somebody he could trust that was going to happen. So all this stuff's connecting in one way or other. So the following Saturday after that, I get a phone call from Jerry Wainwright about 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. Wakes me up. I wasn't thinking nothing was going to happen. He said, man, I've been on the phone. This is 8 o'clock Central Time, so this is how Coach Hamilton doesn't sleep. So I've been on the phone for an hour and a half with Leonard Hamilton. He said, I think he's going to call you and offer you an interview. He said, keep your phone on the hook. Back then we had landlines. You didn't have cell phone. Keep your phone on the hook, and if it rings, answer it.
Yeah.
And so 20 to 30 minutes later, I got a phone call, and there's Leonard Hamilton on the other end of the phone.
Wow.
And he said, I want to bring you in for an interview. Can you come on Tuesday? I said, okay, yeah. I wasn't going to sit there and question and try to negotiate. He said, well, call my secretary. She's at this number, and she'll set up your travel, and we'll go from there. So I go down there and interview, and, again, you never know how coaches evaluate you. So we get there, and he has a player in on an official visit who they had signed, but he hadn't been on an official visit. He was coming from Europe. So at that time, you could bring a guy on in an official visit, and then he could stay and start school because it was getting close to the semester starting. And so I'm in the back seat of the car riding with the parents. The kid's in the front seat of the car. And Coach talks to me about 3 or 4 questions. I talked to the AD for like 20 minutes. Is this an interview? I don't know what I was really doing. Right. But, again, he's evaluating how I was interacting with the parents, how I was interacting with the kid at meals when he was doing it, when we were walking around touring and stuff. Yeah. That's how he's deciding if you can you're getting interviewed and you don't know you're getting interviewed. Yeah. And so we go through that, and on Thursday morning, the assistant coach picks me up. I'm expecting to catch a flight. That's what I was supposed to go back on Thursday. I go back. They take me to the office to meet Coach one last time. He says, I've heard everything I need to hear. If you want the job, I want you to stay another day and get your paperwork and your drug test and everything out of the way. And so if you need to talk to your wife, you can go in that office and use the phone right there. So, Coach ain't one of them guys going to sit around and give you time to think about it. Right. So I go into my wife, and I said, I think this is what we're supposed to do. Yeah. And so she actually was out in California visiting her family with my daughter. And so I get back on Friday night after doing all that paperwork. I drive to New Orleans on Saturday to pick them up at the airport because it was cheaper for him to fly to New Orleans than it was out of Jackson. And we put the house on the market. I tell my AD and the headmaster on Sunday morning. I put my house on the market on Sunday night. It sells on Tuesday for what we asked for.
Wow. That's crazy.
Wednesday morning, the business officer from University of Miami calls and says there's a truck coming through that we're moving a professor in that has room for another house. Can you guys have your house ready to move on Thursday?
Holy cow.
They show up. They have my house boxed and packed. They leave out on Friday night. We spend the night with some friends that are on the faculty with us at Jackson. And Saturday morning, we're driving to Miami, Florida.
Man, it's quick.
And this was the next Monday is when school started at Jackson Academy. Wow. And so my school, the school leadership there was very proactive in saying, we can't hold you back from this. You've done a great job for us. We couldn't look you in the eyes in the hall every day knowing that this was your dream. When you interviewed, you told us this was your dream. Now you've got a chance. We're going to tell you we're going to bind you to a contract. Right. They were off the charts professional. Yeah. And so we move into it. We get started, and one thing leads to another. We go from they had just made the big turn at Miami the year before. They got to the NIT. They'd had like the biggest turnaround from going 0-18 to 9-9 in wins, and then The next year we go back to the NIT, and then we go 3 straight NCAA tournaments. We win the Big East regular season title. And Coach had built up Oklahoma State. He'd built up Miami, and Michael Jordan offers him the job with the Washington Wizards, and I get offered to go with him. And so you go from 5 years sitting in a private school in Jackson, Mississippi, and basically coaching a bunch of affluent white kids to working for an African-American head coach, and now you're going to the NBA. So when you talk about your life being protected by positive prayer, I mean, just another step in how it went. And so we do that. Doesn't go very well. Team's not very good. Not a great fit for Coach and myself and how it worked, even though it was a great experience. Michael decides to come back and play. Michael Jordan's the one that hired him. And so Coach has still got to get paid. I was on a 1-year contract, so I got to get a job. I got to keep taking care of my family.
Right.
And so I get offered 3 positions. One of them was Mississippi State University, who I'd known Coach Stansbury for a long time.
Right.
And I ended up going there. The 1 year I'm there, we win the SEC Tournament Championship.
Wow.
Have a great season. A couple guys get drafted off that team. And then Coach had been helping me all year, talking about helping me get a head coaching job at a school that was probably going to come open. And then we got beat in the second round of the NCAA tournament. We're flying back. We're on the bus coming back from the airport to campus. They were going to have a big celebration kind of deal, even though the team had lost, because they didn't get to do it after we won the SEC Tournament Championship. And so I get a call. It's Coach Hamilton on my phone. And he says, "Can you talk?" And I said, "No, I'm on the bus right now." He said, "When you get free from everything, call. I need to talk to you tonight." So I call him back, and he says, "I'm taking the Florida State job. This was Sunday night." He said, "On Tuesday they're having a press conference. You can't say anything until the press conference." He said, "I know we've been working on this other situation, but I want to offer you this, but I can't wait on the other thing. Either you come with me or we'll work on the other part." And so I called the AD at the other school, and I said, "You tell me I'm in your top 1 or 2 candidates." I said, What's your thing? He said, "Well, this is my first hire." He said, "First time we got been an AD." He said, "I got to go to the Final Four, and they want me to interview some more people at the Final Four." And I said, "Well, I can't stay in it. I can't wait that long."
Yeah.
And so that was on Sunday night. I have to wait till Tuesday. It's funny, on Monday morning, Coach Stansbury calls me. He's going on a recruiting trip to some junior college out in West Texas. And he says, "Look, you did a great job." My family was still living in Miami. He said, "Get you a plane ticket, go down, spend however long you want to with your family. We're not going to be doing anything right now. I'll let you know when you get back. I'll talk to you. We'll talk after I get back from this recruiting trip." So I'm sitting there saying, I'm not supposed to say anything.
Right.
So Tuesday happens the next day. I'm trying to call Coach Stansbury. He's out in some place with no cell phone service.
Dang.
Can't get a hold of him.
Yeah.
Players are coming to my office. They want to know. I heard from Coach your old coach is going there, and so they're wanting to know. So Rick finally gets to a place where he's got messages. Calls me at like 10 o'clock Tuesday. What was that? That would have been Tuesday night. Said, "I heard what happened. It's a great opportunity for you. You're going to do this, that, and the other." He said, "Take all your stuff in, go meet with the AD, and they'll take care of everything for you."
Yeah.
And so, again, he was very gracious, just like my bosses were at Jackson Academy. And on Thursday, I was in a car driving from Starkville, Mississippi to Tallahassee. And now we're sitting here starting 22 years together here, being part of the Seminole family. And we've had a lot of great memories here.
Yeah. Man, that's wild. That's wild. I can go way back.
So that probably took all your time, but you
that's
asked.
Good. Hey, that's great. That's great. Let me ask you this. So you coached you said the 6th grade team, right, when you were in college, and then immediately, seems like immediately knew that's what you wanted to do. What was it about coaching? Like, why was that such a pull to you where you're like, okay, this is what I feel like I want to do for the rest of my life? Well,
that's another really, really good question, but it also leads back to the thing with faith with me.
Yeah.
At that time, I had a much significantly older brother, but he was a big part. In fact, I met my wife through his church. He lived out in California. And for Christmas that year, after I started coaching the 6th grade team, he sent me John Wooden's, I think it was his autobiography, called "They Call Me Coach." And I read it, and it started talking about the influence he had or tried to have on his players, about being life champions and about being living trophies for him, about not just being great basketball players, but learning how to win in every part of life. And so that I was already intrigued by the competition because coaches had always been a big part of me growing in confidence. I was kind of a late bloomer as an athlete. And some of the guys were, volunteer coaches and little league coaches and stuff that were just like dads and everything were kind of big parts of my life.
Right.
Growing up, it wasn't like there was some astute coach out there that had gone, but they had meant something to me on helping me figure out who I was. And so my dad being a minister, I had two brothers that had been in the ministry. I didn't feel that calling on my life, but this started like being almost audible to me that this should be your calling, is to try to make a difference by being like Coach Wooden was on. They call me coach, but coach is for a reason. Is that you're going to try to be a difference maker in a form of a ministry.
Yeah, that kind of leads right into what my next question was going to be. Like that, do you feel like that's kind of your deeper why as a person? Okay, the reason I'm on this earth is to try to influence these young men and these people, just to help them use basketball almost as a sense to help them be successful in life. Kind of beyond that.
Yeah, and not just basketball, just your leadership presence in front of them all the time, where they see you having success and they hear how you've gotten to a point, and hopefully that gives them a reason to make good choices in their life, so they can, have a good life, a good relationship with their families and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, that's kind of been my calling the whole time. And at this point in my career, I have a little reservation with the way things are kind of going in our industry right now.
Yeah.
I'm not sure young coaches. I'm not even sure how even myself right now you can be as effective in terms of trying to transform and develop the something other than a basketball skill right now, because of the landscape that's happened here in the since COVID hit, and all of a sudden we have these new dynamics out there in the of how people are committed to teams and not committed to teams, and the trust factors not being as strong as they should be. And so it's a little disheartening. But it's something that if you're gonna be in it, you got to find a way. And you've got to still stay true to yourself, and you've got to say, this is my calling, and I'm going to, whether they're here for 1 year, 4 years, 5 years, whether they quit on you and just leave on you, whatever, you still want them to someday think back and say, I remember Coach Jones saying this, or I remember Coach being real with me, or Coach always told me the truth. He was the guy that was being straight up with me. That somewhere that's going to resonate. That seed's going to plant, and you never know when it's going to be watered and when it's organically going to evolve in their life, even though you may not see that up close and personal like you could in teams past and players past, because the dynamics were different.
Yeah, it's super interesting. What would you say I would call it like your scoreboard, right? Just like in basketball, it tells us who wins and loses. Like, what's your scoreboard with players? Obviously, that may have changed from 10 years ago to now, but like whether it's 1 year, a few months, or 4 years, like what's your determination? Hey, was I successful in a sense in coaching this player that I hope he walked away with, or I was able to kind of teach or pass on, if that makes sense?
Well, I've tried to coin a phrase, because a good friend of mine he's kind of my biggest confidant in the business, he came up with a kind of phrase for his guys called living trophies. And I've kind of always tried to find something that was better than that. I'm not sure you can find one better than that, but I'm trying to coin the phrase for the guys that if they've chosen to play for me, I want them to look back 20 years from now and they can be called life champions. Whether they were basketball champions for us, whether we won the ACC, whether we go to the Final Four, whether we win the SEC or the Big East, some of the things I've been fortunate enough to do, if they're not life champions, I'm not sure I won on the scoreboard. And so that's kind of how I look back, is how are they doing 20 years from now when they leave us? Have they learned how to treat their spouse? Have they learned how to raise children that are being effective in life? Are they making a difference in their communities and in their families? And are they being good citizens? And are they conducting themselves in a way that's making a difference wherever they are in the world at the time? So that's my scoreboard, is seeing. That's my analytics, seeing where they fit under those kind of things.
I love that. So take it a step back for you personally. What do you feel like your scoreboard is just for your life?
Oh, man. Just for me, I think either one of those things you just said, whether it's the player scoreboard or my scoreboard, if you're going to be authentic and genuine, they kind of got to be the same.
Yeah, for sure. That definitely makes sense. All right, so switching gears a little bit, specifically from the coaching standpoint, because this is something that I think is super interesting, talking to people like me, being around college coaches and stuff. Like I get to see a little bit of what the job is like, and I tell people all the time, it is too much for me, right? And so kind of explain a little bit like how much of your job is actually coaching on the court, and how much is a lot of other things, whether it's paperwork, recruiting, film study, just all the other things that go into it, and just kind of give a little look behind the curtain there.
Well, I tell all our young student staff guys, whether they're graduate managers or undergraduate managers, if you're going to get in this industry, what I enjoy to do the most, which is getting on the floor and seeing guys get better in their skills and seeing a team become the best version of itself as a team, you do the least. There's a bunch of hats that I think every coach has to do all the time, and they all kind of connect. And I've done a couple talks like this when I've talked to some men's group, but the first thing, you got to be a leader. And leader doesn't necessarily mean you're running the huddle up in a timeout or running the huddle up before or after practice starts. You know, leader is the example you're setting, the information you're providing them, and the discipline and the correction you got to give them. So you got to be a leader. Second thing is you got to be an authority. And an authority is not you running around being like you're running a military state, or you're just saying you're doing it my way or the highway. Being an authority is that they know that what you're telling them is right. I tell people this all the time. Everybody in this world listens to one radio station. Back in the day when everybody had call letters for radio stations, when you listen to the radio line, it was WIIFM, what's in it for me. So you have to be an authority, not as just the discipline's part of it, but it should be a small part of that. Your authority should be your ability to give them information about basketball, but about life, about success, about bouncing back from adversity, about perseverance, about resilience. You have to spend time coaching that as much as you do how we're going to run an out-of-bounds play with 5 seconds left on the shot clock. Right. You have to have all that. Third thing you have to have is you have to be a guy you got to be a confronter. And I think in our business, a lot of young guys, really conflict resolution is not taught very much or very well anymore. But if you're going to be an effective coach, you can't let things that aren't going the right way get age to them. Right. They have to be addressed. They have to be dealt with. They have to be moved on from. And that kind of goes back to the authority thing as well. You know, the authority thing is you also got to be you have such a knowledge and a feel for things that you're not just telling them when they do something wrong, but you're also finding when they do things right and knowing how to instill that into them growing through all those things. The fourth thing you got to do is you got to be a mentor. And so when I talk about being a mentor, I think mentor is about being forward thinking. You got to help them see the future. You got to help them paint a picture. You got to be a visionary with them. And sometimes when they don't know, you got to guide them until they find their vision. And that's what being a mentor to me is you're helping them see what it's going to look like at the end of the movie. You know, Stephen Covey says in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, his second chapter is you got to begin with the end in mind. And so you have to be, when a kid shows up here as a freshman and in the recruiting process, you got to start helping them understand what the end's going to look like. So you're mentoring that all the time. And so this all sounds like coaching, but we ain't even got to the court yet. But you have to be having these conversations, whether it's in an office, at a meal, before or after practice. Some things I like to call it intentional collisions, where I know what time you're going to be crossing campus to go to a class, and I just happen to be walking through to, hey, JT, did you think about this? Did you handle this? Have you started setting your goals for next year yet? Where we have an intentional, I keep things on your mind, so you're spending time out of your office doing those kind of things. Then obviously you got to be a counselor. Counselor, I think, is very past thinking. What did you just do? What are the ramifications because you did this? How do we fix this so this doesn't become repetitive? So you talk about being a mentor, you talk about their future. Counseling is talking about what they just did, so a little bit in the past. And then the last thing is you got to be a motivator, which I think is very present thinking, whereas, okay, what are you thinking about right now? What's your motivation for today so you're going to win the day? And it's going to make you better for tomorrow. And so I think you have to be able to talk about all those things as a coach and get there. And then the last hat you have to wear is then you finally get to being the instructor. And the instructor, and I tell all young coaches, the number one thing, and again, I learned this just kind of by studying successful coaches. Back when I was starting as a young coach, at that time, every guy from John Wooden to you can name any coach, they spent a period of time being a high school coach and teaching in a classroom. And I think every great coach has the heart of a teacher. And so you have to be an instructor where you're able to take information and relate it to players in a progressive, system
Yeah.
where they can understand it
Yeah.
and they can see how the layer goes from here to the next layer makes me here, and the next layer takes me here.
Right.
And that's all about how your ability is to go on the floor and to teach.
Yeah.
Almost like it's a classroom laboratory for you.
Yeah.
So those are a lot of things. That doesn't count all the stuff you got to do in terms of your compliance paperwork, your
Right.
travel for recruiting, the amount of phone calls you have to make, and the amount of people you have to touch for future players.
Right.
Because you can't just have one team. You got to be working for the next team too. So when you put all that on, there's not a whole lot of time for golf and fishing and vacations, and especially in today's age and climate where people are pretty unforgiving about if you have one bad year, they forget that you may have had 20 really good years.
Right. Yeah, that's a lot goes into it. So looking at players, right? The players you've coached, what is the biggest difference when this guy's a pro, he approaches what he does like a pro, and this guy is an amateur? I mean, he doesn't quite understand what it means to take this seriously like a pro would.
Again, I've been very blessed and fortunate in my starting my 28th year as a college coach, and obviously I got to spend a year in the NBA and had about 28, 29 guys come through our roster as NBA players. And then having 29 players that I've been a part of coaching get drafted or play in the NBA. And I'm a guy that's a real self-study kind of guy. I'm a guy that likes to see what works and what didn't work so we can be as clean and efficient as we can moving forward with stuff. And I found this characteristics to be happening in the guys that have achieved at the highest level that I've been around. And I kind of call them circles of capacity.
Yeah.
And the first obvious one, you got to have a certain level of genetic giftedness. You got to have that first, but that's beyond our control.
Right.
The things you can control, the two obvious ones are you have a high capacity for work. Mm-hmm. The guys that have been the hardest workers, it's kind of funny that they've ended up achieving the most.
Yeah.
That's not the only thing. Second thing is their capacity to learn. And I show guys on their visits when they come in what an NBA playbook looks like. And say, that it's not just everybody going out there and having a basketball hoop fest. I mean, there is a lot that goes on here that you have to be able to learn, retain, regurgitate, and repeat.
Yeah.
And so you have to be a guy that's very capable of learning and have a desire to learn.
Yeah.
That's why we talk about guys going to class and maximizing your ability to build your brain just like you maximize yourself in the weight room that you have to. But I think the most important thing out of the 5 things we're talking about, besides hard work and capacity to learn, is your capacity of humility. The ability that you're not just coachable, but you're coachable and teachable.
Yeah.
You have the ability that you're not so into yourself that mistakes cause you to have low emotional IQ.
Right.
You have the ability to make a mistake, listen to the constructive criticism, and give it back, and then say, did I get it right?
Yeah.
And if you didn't know it, I'm going to go get an answer. The story I love telling about Devin Vassell, who was here for 2 years, and most people when we recruited him said, why are you going to an ACC school? You're not an ACC player. Well, he had a confidence about it, but he was also smart enough to know that I may not be good enough yet, but I'm going to get good enough. So from day one, he partnered up with who he thought the coaches were talking about did things right the most. He became fast friends with Trent Forrest. But the second thing was he came every day after practice, and he went to a coach and said, now, we went through this in practice. I want to make sure I got this. And he started out his freshman year, and he played 10 minutes a game, averaged 4 points a game, had 4 or 5 DMPs in the first part of the season. By the end of the year, he was getting plays run for him in the ACC quarterfinals and sending games to overtime and being a big part of our rotation. And then the next year, he averaged 28 minutes a game and becomes the 11th pick in the draft. And so the first day he goes to training camp with the San Antonio Spurs, that night I get a call from one of their front office people. And he says, you ain't gonna believe what your boy did today. So what do coaches think when you hear that line?
That's not good.
That's probably not gonna be a good deal.
Yeah.
I said, tell me it wasn't bad. He said, no, this was great. He said we came into our staff meeting after the workout, and Coach Pop came in and said, Devin Vassell is my second favorite rookie I've ever coached. And the staff said, why is that? He said, he's the first rookie that had the courage that came up and asked me questions after practice about things he wanted to make sure he was clear on before the next practice. And I told the guy, I said, did I not tell y'all that in the intel search y'all were doing during the draft process?
Yeah.
He said, you did. I said, that's why I had to call and tell you. I said, he's true to who he is, but that's how he has the humility that he's not going to say, well, I don't think Coach Popovich may think I'm not good enough if I ask him a question. It was like, No, I'm going to go ask Coach Popovich a question because I know if I get this right, I'm going to play.
Right.
Because I'm going to do what he wants me to do.
Yeah.
And so when you have that level of humility, you go from being a good college player or just a good basketball player to being a professional basketball player. And then the two other things you got to be really high at outside of your capacity for work, your capacity to learn, your capacity to be humble is you got to have a high capacity to handle your distractions, and you got to have a high capacity as a competitor. Winning has to matter to you.
Yeah.
You got to hate losing almost more than you love winning, and then you got to handle distractions. And sometimes that's the addictive behavior. Sometimes that's just noise from even your own family.
Yeah.
That's just being in your own head. Sometimes you got to be able to handle those kind of things. And those guys have been able to do that. And I'm putting my reading glasses on for a second because we give this quote to our players at the start of every season, and it kind of encompasses all that. And one thing is from Phil Jackson, the legendary guy, won 11 rings, 9 as a coach and 2 as a player. And he says, in my view, the key to becoming a successful NBA player is not learning the coolest highlight reel moves. It's learning how to control your emotions and keep your mind focused on the game, how to play through pain. And I think when he talks about pain there, he's not talking about just the physical part of it, but playing through the adversity and things you go through when you're not great.
Yeah.
He said how to carve out a role on the team and how to perform it consistently, how to stay cool under pressure, and maintain your equanimity after a crushing loss or an ecstatic win. In Chicago, we had a phrase for this, going from being a basketball player to being a professional NBA player. And that's where we try to get our guys to. That's what your job while you're at Florida State is. We want to take you from just being a talented, potential basketball player that we want you to leave here and have a chance to be an NBA professional basketball player.
Right. And those are also things that translate directly into anything, being able to do those things. What role has keeping strong mentors and peers around you to learn and grow from played in your life, and do you have mentors you still lean on now?
Being an only child and being a pretty self-sufficient guy, I'm not a guy that's had to go around clinging onto a whole lot of people. I try to use every person I meet, including you, and that I see you doing things. I'm learning a lot by observation. I'm a big people watcher. And I kind of got this. My dad used to talk about the guy that kind of started being a great salesman there was a guy named Charles, and his nickname was Tremendous, Charles Tremendous Jones. And he had a quote, and I think I'm paraphrasing a little bit. I don't have it written down where I can do it verbatim, but he said, "We can tell your level of success in 5 years by the 5 books that you read, or by the books that you read and the people that you hang out with." And so I've been a voracious reader. I've tried to study every person and in a lot of different disciplines, from not just basketball coaches. I study a lot of football coaches because I think those guys have an organizational ability about themselves that is different than basketball coaches.
Interesting, yeah.
I study from people in the business world and people that have been very successful in the financial world of how they maneuvered those kind of things, and I do a lot of listening to those kind of things. So I try to make everything in life to be a mentor for me.
Yeah.
Like I said, I got one guy, probably my closest friend in coaching. We've known each other since we were high school coaches, and we've always kind of iron. He's been my iron sharpening iron kind of guy. And if he's in a down place, I try to help him, and if I'm in a down place, he tries to help me. And we're always trying to bounce ideas off each other. Do you think this will work, or if you don't, why?
Yeah,
we'll have those kind of conversations. And then the rest of my mentors have always been back into the faith thing. I mean, my pastor. Yeah, I'm going to talk to him. Other people that I know that are kind of spiritual advisors to me that may not be my pastor, but they're people I know because of my family's network in the business.
Right.
And then the colleagues that I work with. I got a guy every day that in Leonard Hamilton that you watch is probably the greatest CEO of a basketball team that's made it up from his bootstraps without a lot of help. And it's been a great story of confidence and faith and going through stuff. So you see him every day and you learn from him for all these years. It's a college degree in itself just working with him every day.
Yeah, that's awesome. So kind of along the same breath of always learning and watching and things like that. You're known for your knowledge, the way you can think and see the game. what were some things that you did to grow that knowledge? And you kind of spoke to that a little bit. And what are things that you still do today, just practically from a basketball standpoint? Like, these are things that I do to study the game and to keep expanding your knowledge at this point in your career when you've been doing it for a lot of years, you know?
Well, I think it started for me as being a player. Now, I was not a great player by any means. Now, and most of it was because I had some size. I lacked in a lot of the athletic genetic stuff that would have allowed me to play at a higher level and that kind of stuff. But because of that, for me to compete and for me to give myself a chance to get opportunities to play, I had to be a thinker as a player. So I think my ability to coach kind of translated for me how I had to survive against better athletes and that kind of stuff, of how was I not going to get overpowered or intimidated, whether it's a pickup game in the summer or in practice in high school or college, to play in men's league when I got out and still had a chance to play in some teams that were playing in city leagues and stuff that were pretty competitive. I had to think. And it's kind of funny when you go back to my starting career as a coach. I remember down a couple blocks down from my house, there was a big community center that we'd play inside, but they also had an outdoor court if the community center was court. So that's where everybody would kind of go play during the summers and on weekend afternoons and that kind of stuff. And learned a lot of lessons there. But people didn't even know your name. People started calling me coach while I was playing, and I wasn't even into the coaching thing yet, because I would be out there kind of directing, and all of a sudden I'm setting a screen for a guy, or I was making a cut against somebody's vision, or I was throwing the ball away from a defender, which got my teammate an easy basket. And so I had to be that kind of thinker to survive. So that started. Second thing is, when I started coaching, I wasn't at a place that had all these high-level guys. None of the guys I ever coached in high school played professional basketball. So a lot of them went to college. A lot of them went to some lower levels, played in NAIA, Division III, Division II, some in Division I, some just to junior college.
Right.
So for me, but I never wanted my kids to look at things. I'm a lot like Coach Hamilton in that I think part of his success and part of my success is we never were going to make excuses. Our huddle break for me was always 1, 2, 3, find a way. That's what we said. We wasn't no family to give us, find a way.
Yeah.
And I wanted to give my kids the best chance that if we could do these things, didn't matter who we were playing, we were going to have a chance to win. And I never wanted my team to go into a game thinking we didn't have a chance.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people give into that kind of stuff, and I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's also why I kind of got the respect of the coaches at the bigger public schools in the area that I was coaching, because we go to team camps and stuff, and we'd be playing them guys tooth and nail, and we'd be calling out stuff, and we'd be getting easy baskets, and they're not expecting. They're expecting us just kind of get rolled.
Right.
And even if we certainly didn't win all the games, but there wasn't a game we went into that we didn't think we were going to give ourselves a chance to win.
Yeah. No, that's awesome right there. You've kind of alluded to a lot of different things that I think it is, but y'all have had a ton of success since you've been at Florida State. What have been some of the key things, or even the key thing that is kind of set that success? Because there are people who have, coached all sorts of places and know very few people get to this level of success. What are some things that you think has separated you guys here at Florida State?
Well, it starts at the top with Coach Hamilton, because everywhere he's been, he's taking over a program that's been down. He knew he never was going to get a job. It was kind of ready-made. He wasn't. He coached at Kentucky. He wasn't coming out of a coaching tree that was setting him up, because he came out of a different time when he was the first African American coach in the SEC. It wasn't like they were giving jobs away to minorities at that time.
Yeah.
And even if you were at Kentucky and they were at the Final Four and that kind of stuff, he wasn't the guy getting those opportunities.
Yeah.
Where other guys on the staff that may not have done the things he did recruiting wise were going to get him there.
Yeah.
So he's had to be there. So I kind of alluded to this already, but his no excuses confidence is we're not going to go into when we were in the Big East and you were playing when Connecticut and Georgetown and Syracuse, when you're playing against John Thompson and Jim Calhoun and Coach Boeheim and Louis Carnesecca, all these Hall of Fame guys. We're not going to walk in there and say, we're going to be the bottom feeders of the league. You got to go in and say, we're going to find a way. We're going to create something where we're going to be different.
Yeah.
And if we got to ugly up the game, we got to play fast, we got to play a lot of players, we got to do whatever we got to do. We're going to find a way that we're not going to have an excuse. So when you go as in a coaching staff meeting, and coach says, we're going to create this, we're not going to accept that we can't win.
Yeah.
And so it starts with having that no excuse confidence with coach. But, there's other things about coach that just allow your team to succeed. If you ever watch him in the game, people don't really know his personality, because he approaches every game we play the exact same. Whether we're playing a bye game of a low major team early in the season, or we're playing in the ACC championship game.
Yeah.
We're going to have the same preparation. We're going to have the same respect. We're going to have the same focus. We're going to have the same details in our scouting. He's a very detailed. He's almost to the point where we try to stop every raindrop. But empowering your kids when they know there's so much information out there that if they don't get all of it, there's enough of us we're going to have a chance. It kind of goes back to that philosophy I had is you got to maybe your kids think if we do this, we're going to have a chance to win the game.
Yeah.
And, he has an incredible ability to do that. But the other part of things is his ability to mold people. Tell you, as good as he does with the basketball stuff of people, he's a better molder of people. So he builds his staff members up that way. He builds his players up that way. He makes them feel that they're maybe better than what we really are at the end of the day. But when he does that, when we have success, he gives everybody else all the credit. And when something goes bad, he takes all the blame. You never once, and I know you followed our program for a while now, seen him call a player out in a post-game press conference. You've never seen him say something in the newspaper or on the internet about our team not doing this. It's always, I should have done this better. And he's the same way with us. He'll come in if we lose a kid in a recruit that we think we should have got, and we maybe made a mistake on how we handle something. It's always, I should have helped you more with that. It's never like, why you knucklehead, why did you not handle that kind of deal? Same thing in the scouting report is if we made a mistake and we didn't have something covered, it's always, hey, I should have made sure I should have helped you with that. And when you're having a leader that's working like that, it makes you feel, I can't let that guy down. I mean, I got to get this done because he believes in me. He's not putting me under the bus. And kind of deal. So when you get a guy like that can think that way and he empowers everybody to do their job that way, it allows you to do special things. And he also has this proactive sense of what's going on. He has an incredible feel for people. I can't tell you the amount of times we'll finish practice and I'll go up to the office wherever we've coached together at, and he'll say, hey, before you go home tonight, just go by the dorms and check on JT. And I said, Coach, I thought JT was pretty good in practice today. He said, no, there's something. You just need to go by. Just go by and sit in the dorm with him on the side of the bed or on the couch or whatever. Just with the door closed and there's nobody else to him to just 100 out of 100%, he's always been right. Wow. There was something going on that even though the kid may have mastered in practice, he just has that ability to know that stuff. So he's not the kind of guy that's letting players and parents come back and be reactive to him. He has a sense of, I need to go explain this to a parent before it becomes a problem. And that's a vision that you don't see in a lot of people. And I think that's I don't know if that's a blessing, a curse, or if it's a learned behavior or it's something that nature gave you. But however it happened is pretty good.
That's something a lot of people don't have. Last two questions here. Obviously, you're someone who's, again, incredible at developing players, developing people. I want to kind of rephrase even the way I was thinking it. What do you think the biggest keys or biggest markers to successfully developing somebody well, and what do you see in today's basketball world culture are the things that we're making the biggest mistakes in, whether it be coaches, trainers, and just the whole culture of basketball right now in our approach to development?
I think what I see in the younger generation, and I'm not trying to be the get off my lawn older guy, we're better than everybody else kind of deal. That's not where I'm coming from. I'm coming from a observation standpoint of how I started and what I learned from the people that went ahead of me. I don't see the younger people taking the time to teach the entire game. We're taking parts of the game and thinking if we just do the parts of the game, that's going to be enough to sustain success. And it may give somebody success for a moment, but is it going to give them a career? See, to have a career, I think you have to have a long period of obedience in the same direction. And I think we're missing that. And I see so many younger guys, they're spending more time trying to promote one skill, and it's usually with the ball in their hand, that they're not also teaching skills and reads of how to do when you don't have the ball in your hand, or you're playing defense, or you're dealing with the transitions from offense to defense or defense to offense, and how to make those things work together through the flow of a game. And I hope we don't get to the point where we're just letting the game become let one guy dribble the ball till he finds something and pass it if it's an emergency. But this is such a beautiful game that, if you think about it, there's been two dynasties here in the last 20 years. Who are those? I'm going to ask you a question.
Talking about NBA or college?
At the highest level. Who are the two dynasties?
Golden State.
Golden State was one.
San Antonio?
San Antonio was the other. What has caused them to be dynasties? What has both their programs been defined by? Team play.
Team, yeah.
Even though they
The
had
way
great
play.
individual players,
Yeah.
they've had ball movement. They've had a flow to what they're doing. They've had great camaraderie as a group, and they've allowed them to win more championships than anybody else. Mm-hmm. You know, Miami had that couple of run there with LeBron and that kind of stuff, and LeBron's a tremendous talent.
Yeah.
But they can't say that he's been on a dynasty type team, even though they've played in a lot of finals, because they
Right.
didn't win like the Spurs or like
Right.
the Warriors have done.
Right.
And I would love to see more coaches spending more time teaching that ability to have the flow of a beautiful game to keep moving, where there's a just like an orchestration to what's going on out there. That
Yeah.
you know, and you see a lot of that when you watch the European teams play. Now, the European teams can't beat a lot of the NBA teams because of athleticism, but imagine what the game could look like if the athletic part of the game would play the game with that kind of consistent overall play, where you coached and play the whole game,
Right.
and not just when I got the ball in my hand or when I'm going to stand in the corner, and if he decides to pass it to me, then I can do something while I'm standing in the
Right.
corner. I think there's more to the game than that.
Yeah, for sure. And last question, kind of two parts to it. What would your biggest advice be to young players and young coaches?
Well, the first thing, and I try to tell the players, we have a young man that just came into an international kid, and first time in the United States and that kind of stuff, and he's coming out here and he's a little bit behind on his basketball resume in terms
Right.
of experience. But I'm on him every day about playing with joy. And I see too many young players, and their families are creating a lot of the pressure, and the people around them are putting the pressure. The first advice I tell everybody who's going to play this game, and that's what I've always tried to do in all my stops along the way, is make sure when you walk away with it, you're in love with the game. Play for the love of the game first. But I see too many people playing for what they think the outcome of the game is going to be.
Yeah.
And I think that takes a lot of the joy away, and it causes a lot of destructive behavior away from the game.
Yeah.
Because you're spending too much time trying to make yourself happy because you wasn't happy playing the game. And when I was a high school coach, and I'd have guys come in and say, Coach, I think I want to play in college. I'd say, okay, well, first thing, tell me, does the game, is it like an addiction for you? Do you feel like if you didn't play, you'd be lost? Because we don't need to go to college unless you're going to play that way. Because it's going to, the higher you go, the more job-like it's going to become.
Yeah.
The less chemistry there's going to be, even though we all promote culture, chemistry, camaraderie, all that kind of stuff. It's still not the same as when you came through with your group of guys coming up through
Yeah.
little league ball and then high school ball. All of a
Right.
sudden you go to college. So if the game is not something that you're just driven by, you got to have
Yeah.
because you're in love with it, don't try to chase it that far.
Yeah.
Find your, I tell people, find your purpose first. Then you can chase your passion.
Right.
Don't just, if basketball's not your purpose, it's not going to be your passion. So play it for the love of the game. And I would also tell guys, a lot of guys are not going into coaching right now because there's so many things like the hats I talked about you have to wear. They don't want to deal with that minutia and that kind of, it's hard to have some of those conversations someday.
Yeah.
But that's how you affect lives.
Yeah.
And if you're a coach, you got to get in it for the right reasons. You got to be authentic. You cannot be a guy that you compromise from what is right. You can't let that happen to yourself because you see something you want to be. You got to be a guy that's at the point that they see you every day as a shining light. That I hear so many guys talk about back in when high school coaches were really pillars of the community.
Yeah.
We don't see as much of that nowadays. That this guy saved lives. This guy kept kids out of this kind of trouble.
Yeah.
They kept the gym. We've got to get back to coach, not just being a guy that's taking guys on trips, but
Yeah.
a coach is somebody that's out there that's keeping guys on a path
Yeah.
where they got a chance for life to be good for them and they can be champions in life. I mean, so those are things I would just encourage, whether you're a coach or a player listening to this conversation we're having today is, man, do this for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Don't think this is the end. This
Yeah.
is a means to the end. And basketball doesn't have to be the only way you can make money for yourself. It's not
Right.
the way you can find satisfaction for yourself.
Right.
It can be that, but there's also got to be a deeper meaning for you because, I wish I could go. One thing that hurts me sometimes, I think, as a coach now at this stage in my career, you can't demonstrate as well as you used to do. Even for me as a coach every day, I know what it's supposed to look like. Sometimes I can't make it act that way.
Right.
Because my mind says I can do it, but the old knees and the back says I
Yeah.
can't. So even there, you've got to be, what else is going to be fulfilling for you?
Yeah.
You can't just chase this because of how the advent of the phones and the technology and the internet and social media starts being that everybody's going to have this. It's not.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to find out what's real for you and not just deal in the imaginary, because
Yeah.
you can't tell the difference. And you got to go out and find that. You got to give yourself a chance to be in thought every day.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure we're doing that enough as a society anymore. Is challenging ourselves to be in thought and to have creative thinking about how we want the movie to end.
Yeah.
What do we want the last chapter of our book to say?
Yeah.
We're just how do I feel good today? And I'm not sure that's enough.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome, Coach. That's all I got. I appreciate it. That's awesome.
Hope that wasn't too long and too boring and winded, but
No,
you
listen,
asked.
that was I could go for a long time.